Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Griego. Thanks so much for joining us for CBSN Goes Back to School, streaming live on CBSN Denver and on Facebook. Now, many students are back in the classroom this week after a very chaotic last year. We're all looking for the best way to support students, parents, and educators, and that includes both physical health as well as mental and emotional well-being. That's all important. And joining us now is Morgan Finch, a child and family-based therapist from the Aurora Mental Health Center, and Laura Ann Cleveland, Associate Chief Nursing Officer at Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children. These are our experts. So if you have a question you want our experts to answer, just visit our Facebook page and leave us a comment now. Now, children make up a small portion of Colorado's COVID-19 hospitalizations, just over 3%. That's according to the latest data from CDPHE. But with pediatric cases of COVID rising in parts of the country, many people are now concerned cases could spike with students back in person. So first, I want to ask Laura Ann, what should parents and schools be doing right now to protect the kids?
Yeah, it's really back to the basics. And unfortunately, I know many of us don't want to hear it, but it's many of the things that were proven to be successful last year. So wearing those masks, even if they're not mandated, they are shown to work. Getting individuals vaccinated who can, so that those who can't, we're protecting them. And man, teaching that hand washing, that is always going to be something, regardless of pandemic or not pandemic, that's going to keep our kiddos safe.
Yeah, I think over just the last year and a half, right? The little ones, they really learned how to wash their hands repeatedly. It really is. Do you look at this as kind of like a partnership between the schools and the parents, what they're learning at school and home?
Absolutely. Kids are sponges, and if their parents are saying something or even displaying behaviors that's different than what they say, they're going to pick up on that, and it creates confusion for them. What do I believe? What is right? And so it really is a partnership to remind your kiddos to wash their hands, to remind them how to cough into the crook of their arm, just different things along those lines. But it's also, if you're telling your kids to mask or they need a mask at school, it's good to live by that example as well, because you saying it and doing something different is going to cause some conflict in them, and not understanding how to respond then in those situations is going to be tough.
Well, those are some things that parents and kids can do, and we've heard from a lot of parents about this over the last month, about that increased anxiety in their kids as they return to class. And this is what one mom we spoke to had to say.
A lot of kids haven't been to school in over a year. My son, for example, he's scared of everything right now.
You know, this really is a concern that we're hearing a lot of parents expressing. So, Morgan, how can parents and teachers help kids cope?
It's going to come from kind of what Lauren Ann said, is the parents, and helping the parents talk with their kids about what's going on in their community, what's going on in the school, explaining why, you know, there's a lot of anxiety as far as, you know, it can be scary to see people wearing masks, and we can talk about it at home, and I can answer your questions, and I'm here to support you. Another thing for young kids, kind of doing a little story for maybe those kindergartners or first graders to explain, I feel worried about this. I can talk to my teacher. I can talk to my mom and dad or grandparents or their other support systems, can really help them kind of calm down. And also reminding them that you have things that you can do yourself. We can take big breaths, we can draw pictures, we can talk about it. Having check-ins kind of before and after school can be good. And then helping them understand that, you know, we're here to support you.
Yeah, I have 3 kids. I have a college student, a high school student, and a first grader. They all feel differently about all of this. But with that anxiety, I think what's been important for all 3 of them is just to let them know it's okay to feel that.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, parents are feeling the anxiety too. It's not just the students about this transition. What healthy coping strategies can they use to make sure they manage their own stress instead of expressing it in ways that may increase their child's distress, as you were talking about?
I know this term is thrown out there a lot, self-care. But that really is important. It's kind of, the analogy of when you're on a plane, you put your mask on first as a parent, so you're able to help your kid. And I think that's something that's really important right now is us as parents taking care of ourselves, calming ourselves down, because kids pick up on anxiety in the home or anxiety from the parent. And then just also normalizing that conversation, talking about it, not, hiding away from it. And then also, decreasing that overexposure. If, a lot of news is on a lot of times talking about the pandemic and that type of thing, and you notice your kids feeling a little anxious, or you're feeling anxious with that, maybe adjusting that so that way you can stay grounded.
Yeah, they're watching you. They kind of feed off of you. Laura Ann, you're a parent. You know how this feels. You have a full house.
I do. I have 5 children, ages 14 to 7, and some of them have special needs, so processing it can look a little bit differently according to their diagnoses and how they process information. And I think that's important to note too. Exactly what Morgan said. It's per age, it's per developmental milestones and where they may understand things. If you know your kids have a propensity to maybe resort to the grandiose ideas, the kind of extreme, then maybe limiting and downplaying some things is important. If you have others that will create their own story, making sure that you really are basic about the truth, but you don't hide the truth. All those tactics are really important, and you have to know your own kids. And I would just say, also teaching them, I have some kids that are very black and white, and this world is not very black and white. And so we also teach them that this is how we feel we can keep others safe, and we want to love and respect other people. And that includes if others may feel differently about masks or social distancing or the vaccine, that we also need to make sure that we're loving and respecting them and their feelings on it.
Talk about that, because you do have a full house with kids with different ages, and so do I. And I have one kid who is not at the age to get a vaccine, and the other 2, they're going out, they're doing different things, and then coming back into the home. How do we deal with all of that?
It's a great question. I know that my 2 oldest, they're vaccinated because they're able to with their age, and actually some of my younger kids feel very left out because they got to take their masks off when that was more prevalent, and they were able to, like you said, do a little bit more with their friends. It really is understanding and explaining why that is, knowing also that there's hope on the horizon. We know that this is coming to them. They will get their vaccine as well. So giving that kind of fair balance. And now it's somewhat more fair now that they see that their brothers are having to, they have to mask now too, knowing that the Delta variant is very infectious.
Sure. It's easier when you see the whole family doing it. We're talking about vaccines. The Pfizer vaccine, of course, just received full FDA approval just this week. So what do you think this means for vaccinations for kids?
Yeah, what we learned is that the first study with the vaccines looked promising. It looked really good. There were over 3,000 people in the study, which is a great big N, we say. That being said, the government really asked that we double that amount, or that they double that amount. And so they're doing that new study again so that we can have an even bigger N and look at any side effects, especially since this is, it's a more complex age group. So we think that we will probably see approval. My guess is by November. If you think about it, they have to go through getting the individuals in the study, as well as each vaccine. There's time in between each vaccine. So they're working on that. I think that by the second semester for children, we'll start to see that approval go through and hopefully have opportunities for them to get vaccinated.
Yeah, that approval, it's already opening the door to vaccine mandates in schools. Both DPS and Aurora Public Schools, of course, are now requiring all employees get the shot. So will that help curb a potential surge, you think?
Yeah, what we know is that the more people are vaccinated, the more we protect against variants. We protect those who can't get the vaccine. And that's something that has been in society for a very long time with vaccines, that it becomes somewhat of a responsibility for the adults when a child can't get a vaccine, that they get themselves vaccinated, that we're continuing to protect our children. That will certainly help. I'm excited to see the age group expand when it does. And again, we're just going to continue to encourage people during that time to be vigilant, get vaccinated if you can, and still wear those masks and wash your hands.
And of course, we've been asking our viewers to send in their questions. So we want to go over to Dominic Garcia from the CBS 4 studio. And Dom, I know that you've been going through some of those questions we've been getting on Facebook about the return to class. What do you have?
Questions starting to roll in right now. Right now we want to go to Tim. He's got a kind of a two-part question here. This is, how can I talk to a child who is being bullied at school for wearing a mask? Also, what COVID symptoms should I look for in a child? I know their symptoms tend to be less severe. So let's break this up. And the first part, Morgan, I want to ask you, how do you talk to a child who's being bullied at school for wearing a mask?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about it. Lauren Ann spoke to this, about how a lot of families and a lot of kids are going to have different beliefs and positions on this. And we are doing this because we feel like we want to keep ourselves safe and we want to keep the others at school safe as well, and encourage them to talk to people in the school to let them know that this is happening and that you have that you as a parent are supporting their kid and that you're going to help them connect with other people in the school to help with this process.
And then let's hop to the second part of that question. Lauren, I want to ask you, Tim also wants to know, what COVID symptoms should I be looking for in a child? I know their symptoms tend to be maybe a little less severe.
Yeah, we're seeing both severe and not severe. So a little bit that's similar. The hard thing of this is it really mimics other things. So if your child is having even a sore throat, stuffy nose, even allergy symptoms, and then can go to maybe a fever or something along those lines, we're also seeing their GI symptoms. So the nausea, the vomiting, the diarrhea. And again, we know that that also mimics some of the stomach bugs that that pass around. So that's where, if you have symptoms, the schools have encouraged a lot of parents to keep their kids home. And I know that that puts a lot of stress on families, but it also prevents the isolation and the virtual school that we went through last year. So keep an eye on those symptoms. We're seeing a lot of RSV and rhinovirus. Those are infections in your nose and kind of in your throat and your breathing. And again, those can mimic COVID as well. So anything that you're concerned about, monitor it for about 12 hours. And if anything, definitely get them treated. If there are any breathing problems whatsoever, that's an automatic, come see us in the ED. We want to be able to take care of you and make sure that it's nothing more serious.
Yeah, better to be safe than sorry for a lot of this. Again, we're taking your questions on Facebook right now, so if you have some, hop on our Facebook page. We'd love to get them answered. I want to go to the next one. This one is from Anika. She says, what if a child seems to be more withdrawn after being at home for so long and is really kind of struggling to connect with other kids? Morgan, what advice would you have for parents if they're dealing with this?
Yeah, we are seeing that. I mean, kids were at home for such a long period of time. They were removed from their friend group and just other social connections. So my advice would be, again, talk with kids. I can't emphasize that enough, of having those open communication lines with your kid, talking to them about maybe this school year, what activities are exciting for you that you maybe want to try, encouraging them to have that social connection based on what you feel as a parent is safe for your kid, keeping in mind those kind of COVID protocols. But now there are, after school groups, and there are some things for kids to do. So we want to encourage that social connection, but using, something that they're interested in to do so.
And Lauren, I know you're a parent. You had to have probably this conversation several times. What did you tell your kids?
Yeah, again, there's some nuances with my children. And so some of them, when you know that you can't push too much, it's exactly like Morgan said, start tiptoeing, get your little toe in the water. So sometimes it's just, hey, let's go over and say hi to the neighbor. And sometimes it's really doing some fun play dates online and then slowly moving them into person. So these are the same people you've been playing with online. Now maybe we can play with one of them and we're still online with the others, and then building up. That social anxiety piece, we're seeing a ton of that increase. And it's really helping the child know that it's safe and that there's a lot of backfall. So maybe you don't leave them when they go and do something. Maybe you're there as a pop-off valve, that if they're really uncomfortable, it's okay to rescue them, and then increasing that time.
Right. And Morgan, I've got a question just for you personally. We did a story with a high school teacher, and he said not only are freshmen dealing with kind of a new atmosphere, but so are sophomores, because for their whole freshman year, they weren't in school. So this can really apply to a lot of kids.
Absolutely. I think we're just seeing it across the board, and every kid's different, and being at home was a different experience for every kid. So just being mindful of, again, what Lauren Ann said too, kind of that tiptoeing, encouraging kids to be able to see their friends when it's safe, and families feel like they can do that, because that social development age is right at, middle school and high school. Their friends are their world. So we want to encourage that. And we want to be able to help them, gain those skills. Those are really important skills. So again, just slow kind of re-entry back in, but yes, it's affecting all kids at all ages.
All right. Well, we appreciate all your advice. Keep your questions coming. If you have your phone nearby, then you can pick it up. You can scan the QR code. We're hopefully going to, there you go, right there. Actually, the QR code's not there, but you can download our CBS Denver app. You can download it on Google Play. You can download it from your app store. Of course, everything is free. You get all the CBSN content for free. And we're really dedicated to keeping parents up to date on schools. We're also going to send out real-time information right to your phone. So it's a great resource there. And keep your questions coming. Michelle, for now, we'll send it back to you. But we're getting some great ones so far.
Yeah, Dom, these are really good questions. So we'll check in with you in just a bit. And stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be taking more of your questions next on CBSN Goes Back to School. Welcome back to CBSN Goes Back to School. Face coverings in schools have been pretty hotly debated. We've had several of these big demonstrations from people saying they don't want that for their kids. So let me pose this question. Why are face coverings so important for kids, Laura Ann?
Yeah, face coverings, I would say, are important for anybody. We know research shows, even within the hospital, with those on the front lines taking care of these individuals, that it stops transmission of especially viruses that come from your nose and mouth. So covering your nose and mouth is the best way to stop you from spreading things and from you to get any of those germs. And so that's why it's that dual respect aspect. With children, it just extends even more, because these are individuals who not everyone can get vaccinated. We know that age 12 on up can, but these younger folks, the masks are important. The other thing, I've seen a couple people talk about, well, my kid's not sick, so it doesn't matter. And I get that completely. But COVID sometimes can be in your system for 3 to 5 days, sometimes even up to 7. And without any symptoms. And we also know there's asymptomatic positives, and that can suddenly take effect. And so that, for us in the hospital, it's something that we've done, and we notice that our transmission to one another from staff to staff has also improved. And so it really is the best way to protect folks, even if it's the inconvenience of having something on your face.
And Morgan, I want to ask, what do you say to parents who have concerns about how the masks are impacting their kids' mental or academic well-being?
I would say with parents, again, you know your kid best, and you can gauge kind of where they're at. So you're looking for changes in behaviors and those type of things. And if you notice that your kid has a change in behavior, eating habits, sleeping habits, any of that, just checking in with them to see, how are you feeling about the mask? Asking them the open-ended question and not kind of directing where that answer can go, I think can be helpful. Of how are you feeling about this? What is your opinion on this? And having those conversations with the kid to really explore what their fear is in wearing it, or where that anxiety is coming from.
Well, we are still taking questions, and so we're going to go back to Dominic Garcia in the CBS 4 studio. What do you see coming in now?
Well, we got a few good ones right here. I kind of just want to start with a comment real quick. This one is from Gail. She says, my grandchildren are just thrilled to be back. They haven't even mentioned masks. It's kind of become normal for them. Morgan, I think that's the case for a lot of kids. This is just kind of what they do now.
Yeah, I definitely see that, especially, you know, in the younger grades, being at an elementary school and providing services in the building. I see a lot of kids with masks on daily. A lot of our kids are super resilient, and they're just kind of going with the flow. Their teachers are wearing masks, they're wearing masks. And they're just really happy to be back in the classroom with their friends and peers and get to play with people at school. So I definitely see a lot of resilience in our kids too.
And this is a great one. This is, I assume, an alias. This one's from someone named Ruling the World Wide Web, but they do bring up a great point. Laura Ann, what about the bad air quality? This is something we've dealt with every day. Is it safe for kids to be practicing sports outside for hours a day?
That's a great question, and not something that we've always had to deal with in Colorado. It is safe. However, what I would say is if you notice your child is having any sort of respiratory complications, whether it's associated to the bad air quality or anything else, that's something that you want to for sure get checked out by a professional, whether if it's immediate, come to the emergency department. If not, go to their primary care doctor. I will tell you from a personal side, I have a child with asthma and we're monitoring her very closely. So if you do know that your child has some sort of respiratory issue, whether it's asthma or something else, please make sure you're monitoring that. She has not been affected, but it's definitely something that you want to keep an eye on.
Morgan, I got one question personally for you. I know, it's been a year and a half. This is kind of grinding on all of us. My question's about parents. I know my wife and I try and let each other have a few hours just to get away. I guess you got to really take care of yourself too if you're a parent.
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic has been hard on everybody for so many different reasons, but being a parent and being at home with your kids and managing work on top of that and just scheduling and life in general can be really hard. And, we float self-care out there a lot. It's an important word. But really what that means is just taking time for yourself, whether that's, 5 minutes of having hot coffee before your kids wake up, or, being able to watch like a fun show that you enjoy before bed, or getting outside and going on a walk, maybe putting one earbud in and listening to a song or a podcast while you're outside in the yard with the kids. Just doing something, however small, just to make sure you're taking care of yourself, because again, being a parent is really hard in general. And so if you can help take care of yourself a little bit, that's going to show to your kids, your role modeling, like I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing this. It's important. And that's a really good message overall for our kids to see too.
Yeah, I have those open-ended headphones and I'm constantly listening to podcasts. That's a great idea. All right, keep your questions coming. Michelle, I'm going to send it back to you. And I think I just bought you a spa day from your husband.
Yeah, I love that idea. So I'll give you his number and you give him a call.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I do want to go back to the masks. I had a question about this because we have been hearing from parents who say they are concerned about teachers wearing masks and the kids not being able to see their faces or their mouths in the way they phrase certain words and or the way their mouth moves while they say certain words. And so do those clear face shields, is that okay, or does it have to be a certain kind of mask when it comes to teachers and the students?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually deal with that within the hospital, even when we're dealing with maybe babies, little infants that are not used to seeing a full face. That's a very big developmental thing. I'm sure Morgan has experienced that in her school as well. What I will tell you is that the face shield, and we're talking the one that comes from forehead down, is not as great of a substitute as a mask because the airflow can still go under it. But there are clear masks. So that's where the mask comes across and this part is clear. We use those within the hospitals. And the only problem with them is they can fog up. So you have to wipe them down so that the children can actually see your mouth. But that's really successful. Something that I know speech therapists use is a plexiglass in between them. So some teachers do the same thing. They have a plexiglass in front of where they're talking and speaking so that they can take everything off because it actually encases some of the airflow can't go through from their mouth and nose. It can't kind of go out to the children is the concept. And we see those in all different businesses, but especially if you need to get up close with the kid, teaching them how to move their mouths, different things like that, you have the plexiglass in front of you and it's protecting you, but you both can have your mask off. So there are ways to go around it. And I would encourage you to speak to the school if you have any concerns or opportunities for changing that up a little.
And what about the kids? Because, you know, my 6-year-old, to get her excited about it, we bought her this little mask chain, and it's kind of sparkly and princessy, so she really likes that. And then the mask, you know, she likes the Grogu masks and different things like that. And that's how she gets excited. Does it matter what kind of mask they wear as well, a cloth one, a surgical one?
It doesn't necessarily matter. When the pandemic first started, people were looking at opportunities to put filters in them, things like that. The barrier in and of itself, having a barrier is really the important part of this. When you have 2 people with barriers, it's even better. But just having that one is really great. I would really encourage people, if you do even the surgical masks, have them decorate them. Even in the hospital, we're decorating the face shields. It brings smiles to people's faces. One of my sons, his mask is so worn out, but it has a huge smiley face on it, and that makes him happy. So whatever way you can make them fun, do so.
Yeah, okay. Well, Dom, I know that you struggle with this a bit because you have a little one at home. And so, yeah, you got to kind of make it fun. And you're still taking questions.
Yeah, and we got another one that's pretty good, and I think it not only applies to kids but also adults. Kate's asking, my 12-year-old is convinced that she got vaccinated for nothing now that she still has to wear a mask at school. How do I assure her there are other benefits? So, Lorianne, let's start with you.
Okay, I can just tell you to Kate, I understand. My kids said that they totally got gypped because that was part of the selling point of them getting vaccinated. I completely understand, and this is not going to have as much of weight, but the way I've talked to my 2 oldest children is that this is keeping you safe. The vaccine now, even if you get sick, you probably won't be as sick. It's also allowing you to have an opportunity to be around your friends and have a little bit more freedom. So they see it as a benefit, knowing that they are protected from sickness in a way that maybe their siblings can't. And that's a harder concept. Once they're in high school age, it's a little bit easier. They may still feel like they're gypped, which is perfectly acceptable for them to feel that way. I think as adults, we all are feeling a little bit like that as well.
And I do want to follow that up because I am seeing some comments on our page that are questioning some of this stuff as far as, well, I don't know if this is as serious for kids, but I think it definitely can be. So what do you say to parents who might not take this as seriously?
Yeah, so I can tell you, looking at some of the other states, they are inundated with pediatric kids. And this is not a scare tactic, but more as we're running out of pediatric ventilators, the breathing machines that kids are on, different procedures. There are hospitals that are maxed out. We really have not seen this affect children to quite the level that we're seeing it now. And I don't know if that's because the Delta variant is 3 times as contagious, but we are definitely, we're definitely seeing it affect our children, and in ways that we didn't expect, and all different ages. It's not one certain age over the other, lots of breathing problems. And the other thing is, we don't know the long-term effect. We are starting to see that there's long-term effects, especially in adults, but we may not know that for several years. And that's the other aspect of this that can be not necessarily frightening, but concerning.
So I might have mild symptoms if I do have COVID, but we're still not sure about the long-term side effects, even though the immediate symptoms might not be as serious.
That's correct. You're talking that there's evidence that it could cause some depression and anxiety. So we're changing some of the brain uptake of different, whether it's dopamine or norepinephrine, things like that. We're seeing cardiac issues, blood clots, lung issues. I mean, you name it. There's some potential for some long-term effects that we would like to prevent.
Morgan, just based on some other comments I've seen too, I think people are getting fatigued with a lot of this stuff. There's so much information. We see this every day. What do you tell parents and their kids?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to those comments. I'm feeling it too. We kind of felt like last year we went through this big kind of think of it kind of like a race where we, started to see a finish line. We kept getting a little bit closer. We kept getting more excited. We're almost there. And now we're kind of hit with this Delta variant. And that's just bringing a lot of us kind of back to a place where we're kind of remembered and kind of triggered from what it was like the last time we went through this. So yes, I think there is, that concern or fear and anxiety of what is this going to bring? What is this fall going to look like? And all of that. And to that, I kind of talk with families about what is in your control right now. And because right now we feel like a lot of this is out of our control. And when we feel like it's out of our control, we get scared and anxious. And so if we can think of things that are in our control that we can do for ourselves and for our families, that can help. Again, talking about it as a parent, with your other parent or co-parent or partner, about what that looks like. What do each of us need to do as parents to kind of help our own mental health? How can we support our kids? Encouraging those back to school routines. Routines are really good for both you as an adult, but also for your kids. Keeping those conversations going.
Well, you guys are both great. I appreciate it. I know our viewers definitely appreciate you answering all their questions. So for now, Michelle, let's go back to you.
For sure. And with the Delta variant and this recent spike in cases, the school year, it has no guarantees. And many parents we spoke to say that the uncertainty is adding to their stress this year.
So it's been a little nerve-wracking just because we're still in a pandemic. We don't know what next year's going to look like. Fingers crossed, hopefully we don't close again, because that's just a burden for the kids, a burden for the parents, everybody. So just academically, like emotionally for all the students, it's a hard time.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with, Morgan. How can parents help their kids face that uncertainty of whether or not they'll be able to stay in class?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, kind of thinking of we're not in control of the pandemic. We're not in control of a lot of things. So what are we in control of? So, if we go back to online school, maybe there's social groups that we can join that are safe for our kids or safe for our adults, that we can still have that social connection. Or we can play outside, maintaining social distance with our friends, kind of reassuring our kids that if this does happen, we will get through this and we will figure this out together. My mom always told me there's 5 solutions to every problem, and I kind of hold with that. We're going to think out of the box and be creative and find things to do to maintain our mental health and our emotional well-being.
With so many students back in school now, I do have to ask, when it comes to mental health aspect, and then also just what do you do when you get that alert from your school saying, hey, your student was exposed to somebody who had COVID?
Yeah, when you get that alert, first of all, the recommendations now are not necessarily quarantine. It's more monitoring symptoms for that 14-day period. So I have not told my children all the time when they've had an exposure, but oftentimes they already know. It depends on your child. If you know that there's someone who needs the information, absolutely tell them. If it's someone who gets more anxious about that information, tread carefully with that and just see, because we don't know the extent of the exposure. One thing I do tell my children is that, guys, if you're exposed, the good thing is you guys are wearing masks, and this was more towards the beginning of the year where not everyone was, and so just encouraging them that this is a win. And going back to the vaccination question of those that need to wear masks now, it was actually a really positive thing for one of my children going, oh, this is why I'm wearing a mask. Okay, this is a good thing, so that they don't have to stay home. So monitor for those symptoms. Please keep your children out of school. If they develop those symptoms, get them seen by a professional, a medical professional.
All right. Well, Laura Ann Cleveland, you've been so great. And Morgan Finch, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Such important information out there. And also to the viewers for asking all of those questions. And thank you for joining us for CBSN Goes Back to School. And tune in this Friday at 6:30 for our CBS 4 Back to School special, highlighting how we're all adapting so we can thrive this school year. We'll be live at Stutler Bowl Stadium in Greenwood Village, talking to kids, parents, and teachers. And more of your top stories are coming up next on CBSN Denver.